Hey everyone, this is Carly, and before we get into this introduction to Takarazuka episode of the podcast, I have a little addendum. We talk a bit about different ways you can get tickets to see a show live, but less than a week after we recorded, Takarazuka launched a brand new online ticketing system in English. I've already used it twice because I have zero chill, and I can happily report that it is extremely smooth and easy. So if you have the opportunity to get to Japan and see a show, you should definitely utilize this awesome new system that we have at our disposal. We'll post the link on the blog along with this episode, or you can get it from the TakaWiki. Additionally, we got excited and went down a few rabbit holes and had to produce some info on the fly. We mentioned that the former Takarazuka City attraction, Takarazuka Family Land, closed in the 1980s when it actually closed in 2003. If you notice anything else that's off, or more importantly, if you have any questions about anything we discuss, or would like to request that we cover something on the podcast, please always feel free to drop us a line. I hope you enjoy this longer than usual episode.
Hello, and welcome to our Takarazuka Revue fan podcast, where fans from around the world enjoy chatting about Takarazuka Revue news, information, and fan culture. Our episode this week is a brief overview of the review itself, including some fan terminology. And then we're going to talk about some of our own experiences as foreign fans, which we hope might prove helpful. We will probably expand on these topics in future episodes, so please let us know what you would like to hear more about or don't understand in our blog at kaithion.net, that's CAITHION.net/Takarazuka podcast. And let's introduce who's going to be here today. Carly, would you like to start?
Yes, I am Carly, and I'm from New York.
And I'm Jen, and I'm also from New York.
And I'm Lisa from Germany, and I make the two New Yorkers get up early so they can fit my time zone.
Not that early this time.
No, I think we're all actually awake this time. It's great. Okay, so we're going to start with our happy things from recent weeks. And I guess we didn't really discuss who was going to go first, so I'm going to throw it at Carly.
Okay. Yesterday, I saw a video clip of Hokusho Kairi Michan singing, Friend Like Me from Aladdin, and it just made my whole week. It was fantastic. I think it wasn't from the show. I think it was a clip of the recording process for the Disney album. Is that right?
Yes, that is right.
Okay, yeah, it was adorable. She did all the voices, and it just, you can't watch it and not be sad. So if you can find it floating around Tumblr or YouTube or something, check it out.
You cannot be sad when you're watching it? Can't not be sad?
Cannot be sad? Can't not. What did I say? You can only be happy.
There you go. We'll see if we can dig up a link to put in the blog for this episode. Great. All right, Lisa, how about you?
I was going to say this video too, but Carly beat me to it.
Well, you beat me last time, so.
Well, that's true. But I was waiting for this for so long. From the moment onwards they announced that she would be doing Friend Like Me, I was hoping she was getting to do the voices, and she did. It just makes me absurdly happy. I pre-ordered the CD and I have been refreshing my tracking aggressively since I saw that video.
Now, was this a CD that also comes out with DVD like they release sometimes?
Yes. There are two versions. One is only the CD and one is the CD and the DVD.
Yeah, that's great. So you can actually watch them recording those songs.
Yes,
that'll be fun.
I already also saw the duet between Hinami Fu and Hokusho Kairi.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so beautiful. It is so sweet. I think I got cavities watching it.
They are a very, very cute couple, that's for sure.
They are.
All right. Well, I guess if you don't mind, I'll move on to mine. I have two things, because my original happy thing was going to be related to one of the things that I'm talking about later in this podcast, which is the history of the Takarazuka Revue. And I really love these vintage Takarazuka things. And I collect the old postcards of the actresses and vintage playbills and older issues of their official magazines, which, incidentally, Kageki magazine began publication in 1918, and Graph began publication in 1924. So those magazines have been around for a while. But anyway, I found a couple of really nice pre-war postcards of Mio Azusa, who was an otokoyaku in the 1930s, and they finally arrived a couple weeks ago. So they're really beautiful. So I'll post a link with some of my vintage postcards in our blog post if anyone wants to check them out. And my other thing that I realized we really need to talk about is you'll notice we have some intro music this week. And it's based on Sumire no Hana Sakugoro, which is a very famous Takarazuka Revue song, which is based on a popular German hit in the 1920s. Lisa, you're going to have to correct my German here. It's what? Wenn der weiße Flieder wieder blüht? Something like that?
Something like that. Wenn der weiße Flieder blüht.
Yeah, see, I couldn't say German at all.
I would have known what you meant. It's totally fine.
But I asked my brother if he could help us out because he's working on his music theory PhD, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't step on any toes copyright-wise. So I asked him to do an arrangement for us, and he made this arrangement for us. He wrote it, and then he has some roommates who have a string quartet called the Arcanum String Quartet, and they actually recorded it for us. So we were very, very excited about this. And we're also going to put up a link to the String Quartet's website if you want to check them out, because they're some pretty cool guys, and they spend a lot of their time going to schools and playing for young elementary kids, which I think is really neat of them. And that's our happy things. So we're going to start out with what is Takarazuka? Carly, if you want to take it away.
Yes. So Takarazuka Kagekidan, or Takarazuka Revue, is an all-female musical theater company that has now been around for almost 102 years. We are entering the 102nd year, which is, I think, fantastic. Yay. Their motto is, in Japanese, Kyoku Tadashiku Utsukushiku, which translates roughly into modesty, fairness, and grace. And that kind of permeates everything from the content of the shows to the actresses' behavior on and off stage to the fan behavior. It's just sort of it kind of, what is the word I'm looking for? It's the unwritten rule that everyone follows as a fan or a member of the Revue. When you're entering Takarazuka or trying to enter Takarazuka, you apply to the music school or TMS, where you study for 2 years before having your debut. And even after debut, the actresses in Takarazuka are actually called seito, which means student, throughout their entire careers, as opposed to actresses, because the idea behind it is all of Takarazuka is kind of preparation for whatever you choose to do in life after you retire, whether that's continue to pursue a different type of career in theater or entertainment, or go on to be a wife and a mother. I think that was more of the original intent back when Takarazuka was first invented, but it's taken on a much greater meaning over the years because many, many actresses go on to have fantastic careers after Takarazuka. There are 5 troupes: Flower Troupe, Moon Troupe, Star Troupe, Snow Troupe, and Cosmos Troupe, which is the newest. And there is also Senka, which is a group of superior members. That's what Senka means. They're mostly older upperclassmen who have been around for a really long time. Recently, there have been some younger upperclassmen added to Senka. and they sort of travel between troupes on a show-to-show basis instead of sticking with one troupe like everybody else does, to add something, bring something to the table that I guess enhances whatever show happens to be going on. The members of each troupe, there are, I'm going to say like a rough average of 75 per troupe, except for Senka, but it really varies. Right now, it looks like every troupe has somewhere between 70 and 80. They're divided into otogiyaku, or people who play the male roles, and musumeyaku, or people who play the female roles. Sometimes the older seito who play female roles are referred to as onayaku, and that can be either more senior seito who have always been musumeyaku in the past, or senior otokuyaku who happen to take on a female role for a particular show and maybe switch back after that. And that's kind of all the basics. Does anybody have anything to add to that?
Carly, do you maybe want to explain the difference between the word musume and onna?
Yeah, musume, the direct translation to that would be daughter. So it's sort of a younger, more innocent image, I suppose. And onna, the direct translation is woman. Let's see. I mean, there are definitely some more comedic onayaku roles also. So sometimes it's sort of stripping away that like young, beautiful, innocent image, and it's more of a older, stronger, brash type of character. Would you guys say that's accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And just to round up the three, then otokoyaku, the otoko is...
Oh, boy.
Yeah, or man.
Yeah.
Oh, and you talked about the debut, and just a lot of people hear the word thrown around. Hatsubutai means literally like first stage show. So Hatsubutai is the word for their debut show. Did we want to talk about how that happens in Takarazuka at all, or?
Sure. So typically, there's the Bunkasai, which is while they're still in TMS. That's their first big sort of debut show. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. They do one show in their first year, and they do one show at the end of their second year, and that's the Bunkasai.
And then their official Hatsubutai is their first appearance in an actual Takarazuka production. Typically, this is before they are assigned troops. So all of the members of one graduating class, will rehearse a line dance that appears during the finale of a given troupe's show in the spring.
The last Hatsubutai, for instance, was Tsukigumi's Ichinana Hachikyu, 1789, which also showed the speeches that selected members of the graduating class give before the show actually starts. So you can see a lot of adorable, young, very nervous people trying not to make a fool of themselves in front of an audience.
It is really adorable. I think Tsukigumi got the past two Hatsubutai, didn't they? They had the 100th anniversary one also.
Oh yes, they had that too.
Yeah, somehow the way it always runs out, Moon Troop seems to get more than any of the other ones.
Interesting.
But what was I gonna say? I keep losing my train of thought this year. Okay. Anything else anybody wanted to add?
Maybe we could also clarify the terms honkasei and yokasei, because a lot of people are going to hear those in interviews about the time spent in TMS, for example.
That's true. Mm-hmm. So TMS, the music school, is a 2-year program, and your first year you are a yokasei, and your second year you are a honkasei, and that's basically what those two terms mean. It's a definition of your year in music school.
Yeah, and everybody has to go through the music school who's going to be in the review. So because everyone goes through the school in certain years, even after you graduate from the school and become a member of the review, they still refer to each other as senpai and kohai, which are Japanese terms that are used in regular society and even in companies. Your senpai is somebody who's more senior to you. They have seniority. And the kohai is someone who's below. So everything in the culture in Takarazuka is based on that system. You'll see in interviews, they always let the people with seniority speak first. It's very interesting culturally.
It might also be worth noticing that the seniority in this case is based on the year you entered the music school and not on your actual age. Because there can be age gaps in one class even, of up to 4 years.
That's a very good point. And the same is true for top stars. Typically, the length of time you've been a top star is sort of your top seniority, even over your debut year. So while someone might have been your senior when neither of you were top star, two top stars, the one who debuted as top first typically has seniority.
Maybe we can illustrate that with an example. Let's say Ryo Masaki of Moon Troop and Hokusho Kairi of Star Troop.
Yes.
Hokusho Kairi debuted before Ryo Masaki did, but because Ryo Masaki made top star first, she now has seniority over Hokusho Kairi, technically.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But because Ryu Masaki, like in the Shinjin Koen or the productions that the underclassmen do where they take on the roles of the upperclassmen, sometimes she actually had Hokusho Kairi's roles in some of those Shinjin Koen, or, you know, she got advice from her. So even though technically she has seniority because she's been top star longer, I think you'll find in a lot of reviews and things that she's still going to defer to Hokusho Kairi.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic.
Personal relationships, of course, also factor in.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, I'm going to take over and talk about the history a little bit here. And the information that I'm going to be talking about, you can find most of it on the Takawiki, and most of that information is from the official Takarazuka website, as well as several of their publications. And if you're interested, like I said, there's more information on the Takawiki, but I also highly recommend, there's an English book that was published just a couple of years ago that I highly recommend. It's Makiko Yamanashi is the author, and it's called A History of the Takarazuka Revue Since 1914. It's a little pricey. You're talking about $100, but if you know somebody who's in a university system and they can get books on loan from other libraries, that's definitely one way you can get a hold of it. And yeah, definitely recommend it. And I promised to try to keep this brief. I really, really did try, but 100 years of history is really hard to summarize quickly. But the Takarazuka Revue was founded in 1913 by Kobayashi Ichizo. Kobayashi is his family name. He was a president of Hankyu Railways, which is a railway line, a local line near Osaka. And he owned some of the famous Takarazuka hot springs. That area of Japan is really famous as a vacation spot. And the railroads were there to get the tourists to the hot springs. And so he started this stage troupe entertainment as another way to draw visitors out. So it was all kind of connected in a pretty savvy financial business venture. And this next part is slightly hearsay, but it also makes a great deal of sense as well. They say that Kobayashi hired and trained young girls because they would be less expensive to pay than like traditional actors. And the idea of women on stage might have been a little risque at the time, but he convinced the families it would be okay for their daughters to join because they would be trained in several traditional graces, which would make them more attractive marriage prospects. So they learned how to carry themselves, how to talk, how to walk, that sort of thing, as well as like Japanese graces like flower arranging, koto, tea ceremony, and things like that. And these girls joined very young. We're talking like 11, 12, 13 years old. And they weren't really expected to act in the theater for very long before they left to get married and start families. And I'd like to say as a side note that this attitude of the Takarazuka Music School being a good place for young ladies to learn discipline and become good marriage prospects, it continues even to this day to a certain degree. Like, there's a really interesting interview of a father talking about why he encouraged his daughter to join in a documentary called Dream Girls. But you also have to bear in mind that the team working on that documentary had a really definite agenda. So that interview fed into this agenda. But the father basically says, well, I wanted my daughter to learn discipline and to marry well. And like my wife was a member of the school, so it was sort of passed down through the family. But it's really a minority case for most of the applicants these days. So, okay, getting ahead of myself slightly here. The first performances of Kobayashi's theater group were these short skits and folk tales and chorus songs. And they were performed on a temporary stage erected in the hot springs. There's some really interesting pictures of them. Like they put up a wooden stage right over the bathing areas. So the first performance in 1914 marks a date that the Revue actually uses as its anniversary. And that performance included a skit of the folktale The Peach Boy. So you'll hear people talking about that a lot. In 1918, the theater troupe began traveling to perform in Tokyo as well. And their first iteration of the official music school opened in 1919. In that time period, there was also a boys' Takarazuka group, but they only lasted a few years before they were discontinued. And some members of that boys' troupe went on to become directors, really famous directors of the Takarazuka theater group. In 1921, they actually had enough members then to split into two groups, or troupes, or kumi in Japanese. So flower troupe Hanagumi and moon troupe Tsukigumi were the first two. In 1923, snow troupe Yukigumi joined them, and throughout the 1920s, they built various new theaters, including their first grand theater in Takarazuka City. So if you hear someone talk about Takarazuka Daigekijo, that's the grand theater. In 1933, Star Troupe, or Hoshigumi, became the fourth troupe. But we actually nearly lost Star Troupe, because during the war, it was dissolved. So from about 1939 until 1948, there was no Star Troupe. During the 1930s and 40s, they're really interesting years for this theater group. There were very specific government censors for performances all over Japan in that time period. And if you look at the titles of the shows that they were putting on, and we have some of those listed on the Takawiki, you'll notice that they're very nationalistic, very militaristic titles like Boys Air Force, Military Schoolgirls, From Manchuria to Northern China, Children of the Nation, the Empire of Japan, things like that. And if you see pictures from those performances, they're always in uniform. There's always like bomber jets and things like that on the stage. And interestingly, though, at the same time in 1938 and 1939, the group had its first tours to Europe and to America. During the war, the girls traveled around the country, and they also traveled to Manchuria to entertain the military troops. However, as the deprivations of the war hit Japan, in 1944, their main theaters in Takarazuka and in Tokyo were closed, and they were used by the Japanese Army and the Japanese Navy. After the war, those theaters were taken over by the occupying Allied forces. The Grand Theater did finally reopen in 1946, but the Tokyo Theater didn't reopen until 1955. The 1950s saw a revival of the theater group. Instead of the short performances that they would put on like 3 or 4 at a time, they began putting on these first full 2-act spectaculars with the lavish sets and the costumes, and many of these even had real horses on stage. They were really trying to revive the troupe, bring in the audiences, and entertain a population that, really, really desperately needed some escapist entertainment. One of the most famous of these was Gubijin, or You the Beauty, based on Chinese history. But it was in 1974 that Takarazuka Revue really roared into Japanese pop culture with their first production of The Rose of Versailles, which was based on a popular girls' comic of the time. This was called the Berubara Boom, and the actresses who played the lead roles in this and subsequent productions of The Rose of Versailles became national superstars. So we had Anna June, Haruna Yuri, Migewa Natsuko, and Otori Ran. And this was the real beginning of the top star system as we know it today, and also the beginnings of the really unique fan club culture, which we'll discuss more of later. In 1993, the Takarazuka Grand Theater that we know today opened, and the Tokyo Takarazuka Theater was rebuilt as well, reopening in 2001. So if you go to either of those theaters today, They're very modern and fairly new. The fifth troupe, Cosmos Troupe Sorogumi, was created in 1998. And finally, the Revue celebrated its 100th anniversary in 2014. So someday we'll dedicate a whole podcast to the history, and I can talk about things like how otokoyaku voices changed after mics became available, when they first began cutting their hair, when they first had the grand staircase, the shanshan, and all the 1,000,001 other fun things that I had to leave out here. But I've been talking for way too long already, so I'm going to pass it on to Lisa. Did you have anything, or actually, before I pass it on, did anyone have anything to add talking about the history?
I think it's very interesting that we saw this surge of Takarazuka in the 1950s. This is a bit tied into my work, but I'm currently working on clearing up the dying and birth registers for our whole region since the 1840s. And you can clearly see that in the years after a war, you usually have a lot more women actively working.
Right.
Because you simply ran out of young men to work. So this might also have factored into the girls, so to speak, getting to keep their work even after the war was over, even with their theaters occupied. And there are a lot of parallels, especially to the military propaganda and them traveling to entertain the military troops. You have the same on each side of the World War II. You have the same, for example, in France, when American stars would travel there to cheer up the soldiers.
Yeah, I always think about Glenn Miller when you talk about that. Like Glenn Miller, the really famous band leader, and then his plane went down and he disappeared. So, interesting mystery.
I'm thinking Marlene Dietrich, but that's because I'm German. And I think that this is a really interesting chapter of the history, but it's a chapter that is not talked about much, I think. I really haven't seen an in-depth discussion on that.
I was really impressed. During the 100th anniversary, the museum, Takarazuka Museum, and some other museums had traveling exhibitions, and I went to see it. And one of the things they had was this huge wall of a lot of the posters. And I wasn't expecting them to include as many of the war propaganda posters as they had. It was really neat to see them. I was impressed. So it was very neat.
The museum general is super interesting, I think.
Definitely.
Carly, did you have anything to add to that? After I just butted in.
No. I think that was a pretty comprehensive summary.
It was. For 100 years, that was really impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much fun things to talk about because, like you said, you can't just have theater standing by itself. It's incorporated into the history, what's going on around it at the time. So it's really very interesting to see how the theater has changed over the years, reflecting Japanese culture and foreign popular culture as they took in, all the music that was becoming popular overseas.
And how foreign culture is seen. I mean, it reflects a part of their worldview.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't do something that your audience can't relate to, so you can look at it from more than one point of view.
And just thinking like a more recent historical example, like just 10, 15 years ago, suddenly there was this big boom of interest in Korean TV dramas in Japan. And suddenly Takarazuka started putting on and adapting all these Korean TV dramas. So they're still doing it today. It's very neat. I guess we will move on. Lisa, did you want to talk about going to the theaters or?
I think after we mentioned that we have the new theaters, we might as well talk about them a bit. Although I have to say, I'm personally more a fan of the Takarazuka Grand Theater than the Tokyo one. It does feel a bit more like, I know this is going to sound strange, but going to Takarazuka feels a bit like going to Disney World.
I've heard that before.
You can really tell it used to be an onsen because when you get off the train, you already feel like you're on holiday. And from the train to the Hananomichi...
And
They used to?
I was going to say there used to actually be a theme park and a zoo there that just closed down like in the 1980s. So even up till very recently, it used to be very much like Disneyland.
Yeah, it still feels like it. And it's amazing how much they actually fit into that one theater. I don't think I've seen something like this before, but when you enter the Takarazuka Grand Theater, there is not only the theater where you can sit in and watch plays, there is also the bow hall where you can watch smaller plays. They have a museum in the theater. They have all their rehearsal rooms. They have shops.
They have a post office.
They have a post office. But considering the amount of fan mail that Takarazuka probably gets and also produces. It's
necessary.
understandable, I think.
It's funny because I lived around the Tokyo area most of my time in Japan. So to me, Tokyo is home. And it is fun to travel to the Grand Theater, or Mura, the village as it's called. But for me, Tokyo's home. So I love the Tokyo Theater.
They're both gorgeous. I grew up around Broadway theaters, and now that I've been to the Grand Theater and the Tokyo Theater a couple of times, every time I go see a Broadway show, even if I have the worst seat in the house, I feel like I'm so close because the theaters are so big and impressive.
Yes, the dimensions are completely off. When you went to see Elizabeth with us, and we just looked at the stage, and after seeing the Takarazuka version, it was just like, oh my gosh, that stage is so small. Why are you going to fit all this?
Germany, yeah.
I mean, it was a tour production, but still, where are you going to fit all this?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because I have some friends who are theater people, and they see the Takarazuka stage, even if they're not interested in Takarazuka as an art, like, they love the theaters because they've got their own designated rotating stage that's there for all the productions in the two big theaters, and all the lighting is just amazing that they have set up, and they have all the trapdoors that go up and down. It's just really, really neat. The lifts are pretty cool.
The whole technique that goes into producing these shows is amazing. I think watching one from backstage would just almost be as exciting as watching it from the audience. Mm-hmm. Just to see how this actually works, how people show up on different sides of the stage just on time.
They did a really, really neat TV show a couple of years ago on Sky Stage, their designated Takarazuka TV channel, and it was different segments of talking to the different people, different tech crews and things like that, and you actually got to see some of the stuff going on backstage, like the quick changes and the lifts and things. And one of these days I'm going to get around to finish translating them. But they're really, really neat.
Yeah, that sounds really cool.
It really does. Maybe we should take the time to talk a bit about the seating system in Takarazuka. Mm-hmm. Or how you can estimate how much your ticket will cost and how well you can see.
Yes. I guess I'll do that. So currently, the way the system is set up is they have double S or SS seats is a very tiny section in the middle front couple of rows, and it's almost impossible to get a ticket there. Most of those are set aside for the actresses to actually give to people that they choose to give them to. And then around that, they've got the S seats, which are used to be just like the front half of the first floor, and now I think in both theaters it's most of the first floor is the S seats.
Yes.
And then they have the balcony seating, which is the first couple of rows are S, and then they have A, and then they have, boy help me, B is the back. And then in the very back in Tokyo, it's up on the back of the balcony, and in Takarazuka it's in the back of the first floor. They have standing seating, which is tachimi, and those seats are, you can't order them in advance except for special occasions. Those you have to show up the day of, and they only go on sale if the show is sold out. And those tend to be very cheap. You're talking about 1,500 yen, which is really nice. And I spent most of my money in tachimi so I could go a couple times a week. And you're pretty far back, but if you've got your opera glasses, you can get a good view. And it's really nice, I think, from the balcony especially for the review shows where there's a lot of dancing, you can actually see the whole stage, so you can see all the choreography really nicely.
Tachimi sometimes also is your lifeline if you want to go see a show that's sold out in like 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And you would have needed to probably be in an actress's fan club, an actress who is high up the ladder for 15 years to have a chance at getting a ticket. So if you ever didn't get tickets and still want to see it, tachimi is still an option if you can stand for like 90 minutes. Yeah,
so let's talk about Tojitsuken. Tojitsuken are tickets sold on the same day. They're set aside. Somebody will have to remind me of Mura. I haven't done it as much in the Grand Theater in Takarazuka, but in Tokyo, it's the back row of seated tickets in the B section, and the tachimi are both sold the same day. And people will go and the tickets start going on sale at, boy, it's been so long, 8:30, I want to say. But people start lining up before then, depending on the popularity of the show. There were sometimes I had to be there by 4 o'clock in the morning. And they start selling the tickets. They sell all the seated tickets first before they'll sell the tachimi, and the seated tickets were $2,500. So, but what you can do is if you're in line and you get up before those are all sold out, you could say, no, I want tachimi, and they'll set you aside, kind of start a second row, and then once all of the seated tickets are sold out, they'll pull you back into the line so you can get your standing tickets. They're pretty cool.
It might also be worth mentioning that you usually can only get 1 ticket per person, I think.
Yes.
In the Tojitsukan
so you can't
line,
stand in line for 2 people. Mm-hmm.
you have to go yourself.
With your friends.
Yes.
Although what you can do, sometimes it's frowned upon, but what I would sometimes do with my friends is bring something that you can sit on. Like I would bring a little plastic sheet, and you can leave that in your spot, and then you can leave it there and you can go get coffee for a couple hours and stay warm or cool, depending on how the weather is, and then go back. Like, I wouldn't leave your purse there that somebody could take, but if you leave something that you're not worried about somebody taking, it's pretty safe. Other people in the line will look out for it for you.
Maybe we should also talk about a way of getting tickets before you have to resort to doing Tojitsukan. For a very popular show, at least. This was, interestingly enough, one of the poll options for foreigners who came into the theater and were being polled. The question, how did you actually get a ticket? You're a foreigner.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, it is. I think a while ago it used to be really difficult to get tickets if you were not in a fan club as a foreigner. Mm-hmm. But I think it eased up, especially lately with the promotion offers that have been made. Promotion offers meaning that if you are a foreigner, you could get discount tickets for certain shows. Usually even as Seki. So the company is showing an interest, apparently, in getting more foreigners to see their shows.
Yeah. Was Dragon Knight the first time that they did that?
Dragon Knight was the first time I saw it.
Yeah, me too.
But I think they also did it for Manon now.
Right. So since Dragon Knight, for a couple of shows, I think, didn't they do it for Love and Dream also? I thought I saw that.
Really?
Yeah,
yes,
they've had these promotions where...
But only for Tokyo, I think.
Oh, maybe.
Love and Dream, I think, was only for Tokyo.
Well, they've been trying to pull in foreigners to answer survey questions so they can kind of assess probably more of Takarazuka's viability as a tourist attraction more than catering to us crazy foreign fans. But in order to get those foreign bodies in the seats, they've offered these really cool discounted tickets that are a lot easier to buy if you're a foreigner and you're willing to fill out the survey.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you haven't been to the Tokyo Theater before, it's in a district of Tokyo that's kind of near the center of Tokyo, so it's near some touristy areas, and it's right near some popular hotels for foreigners to stay at. So you actually do get foreigners who kind of wander around or visiting, and they see it, and they actually go up to the windows and get same-day tickets, which if the show isn't crazy popular and it doesn't sell out, you can get tickets up until the show actually starts. So I've seen a lot of foreigners do that who don't speak any Japanese, don't really know anything about what they're getting themselves into, and they go and they watch the show. So I think we're more used to that happening. And then we started joining the fan clubs, and then they got that. And then foreigners started helping each other figure out how to buy online tickets and things, which we can talk about. But yeah, it's very interesting. Like, none of this was happening when I was still living in Japan, so it's interesting to see what they're doing now.
It's really interesting that they are trying to actively inform people. When I got pulled, it was in the Takarazuka Great Theater, but you still got an information leaflet, I think about 4 pages, on the history of the Revue and what this actually is that you wandered into.
Yeah.
And they had it in several different languages, I think in Japanese and Korean, in Chinese and English. So they were really prepared for having foreigners. At the same time, they asked if you had a favorite troupe or a favorite star. So they kind of assumed that you at least know one name that you can say.
They're definitely, I mean, the internet fandom exploded in the last 10 years. Let's admit it. And I think they finally, like, before then, they were very, like, they would crack down on anything. If you posted pictures online, the Revue was there to, like, shut you down. They were very proprietary over their goods. But then, of course, as the internet has evolved and people just share and share and share, there's no way to, like, really push the top down on that. So I think they've started embracing it when they started their Facebook page and they started posting pictures and things. Like, it's very interesting to see how they're starting to adapt to that as well. And like, I could see that going into it. But I think it's interesting, like, all these news things where they've been posting on their website talking about these tickets and things, I don't see them publishing anything on the English portion of their website about that. Have they been doing that as well? Because it seems like that's where it would be the most useful.
I think they just concluded that Facebook is the best way to reach the foreigners too, because the information and the link to the ticket purchase has always been posted on their Facebook page. And I think I do remember that some foreigners said they commented on the website not being very up to date when they were in this poll.
Well, they just rehauled the whole website, and I found it a lot harder to navigate now that they've rehauled it, to be honest. As someone who speaks or reads Japanese, I'm like, oh, bad. Why did they do this? Like, they buried everything, but...
I think they specifically meant the English portion of the website.
Yeah. Which I don't think has even been updated, has it?
No.
They updated... They did update it for the 100th anniversary. They finally translated the history section, and they added that, because before then it was just the two theaters, whatever show was playing at the time, so...
But I also think that it's interesting that they're getting more and more into this habit of social media, as in utilizing YouTube, for example.
Yes.
In posting official clips, so you don't have to feel guilty anymore when you want to show people something. And you can say, this is official promotion material, I'm allowed to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, other theaters in Japan have been I think they're a lot faster with that. Toho, for example, has been pretty amazing in their social media lately.
Yeah, I feel like they started their TV channel in like 2003, 2004, and that's when they started moving everything off of like mainstream cable channels onto SkyStage, so they had, again, proprietary control over it. But then I think when they started doing that, they were like, well, all our interviews are going to be on this channel. Why do we need to put them anywhere else? Whereas like Toho theaters didn't really have like an official channel for themselves, so they were like, okay, we're gonna have to put them on the website. It's interesting.
Yeah, but Toho does. I think they used the internet better. For example, when they were doing Les Miserables, they had a flash mob in the Hibiya Chanter.
That was great.
With the actual actors just standing there and buying a bread, and then Javert suddenly starts singing in the bakery.
We're definitely gonna have to put that clip up on the blog because it was fantastic.
It was beautiful.
And I think something to let our listeners know too is Toho actually owns control of Takarazuka Revue. Like, I don't think people realize that. The Toho entertainment industry, which they have their own movie thing, like Godzilla is Toho. I think their office building is actually the suites above the theater there in Tokyo. So
their main theater
they're the same company. They're just doing things differently, very differently.
The main theater, the main Toho theater also is right across from the Takarazuka theater.
Are you thinking about Krea, or are you thinking about the Imperial Theater?
No, I was not thinking about the Imperial one. Sorry.
Okay, oh, was I? Because they do a lot of shows there.
Yeah.
And that's nearby, but it's not right across the street.
Yeah, but one's almost right across the street.
Yeah, it's just a block away.
In Tokyo, that's right across the street.
So if you're not lucky enough to have one of these social media promotions aimed at foreigners line up with your trip to Japan, we should talk about how to get tickets on a normal day.
Yeah. I guess it depends on if you're coming to Japan specifically to see a show, and so you know ahead of time and you want to buy them ahead of time. That's one way to go about it. And then the other way is if you're actually in Japan right now and you're like, hey, what is this thing? I'd like to go just wander down to the theater and get a ticket. That's another way.
The two methods that I have personally used are, I guess the first one is what I like to call the easy cheating method, and that's to go to myfavoritetingsjapan.com, snag her email address and say, hey, I want this ticket. And then she says, okay. And then she buys it and mails it to you.
That would be the easiest way to go, yeah, if you don't speak Japanese, because otherwise it gets very complicated very quickly. On the Takawiki, we do have a step-by-step way to buy tickets through the online Takarazuka ticketing system. But in Japan, there's also other electronic ticketing systems that you can use, kind of similar to what we have in the US. And each of those is a little different. I use both of those while I was there in Japan. And some of them are nice because they actually have pre-sales that you can get in on. So if you speak Japanese and you are familiar with the ticketing systems, check out the pre-sales because they're very nice, especially if shows sell out quickly.
Does the official online ticketing system accept foreign credit cards now?
It does, but I think you still need to have a Japanese address to put into the system. So if you're staying at a hotel, sometimes you can use the hotel information. But yeah, check out the walkthrough guide because somebody actually went through and did it to check it out for me because I was back in the US at the time. And they had completely changed the whole ticketing system between the time that I came back. But yeah, they're taking most foreign credit cards now.
Great.
And the other thing is, like, people make it sound really scary of like, oh my god, if you don't get your ticket right away at this very moment, you're never going to get a ticket. If you don't mind the kind of seat you're going to get, and if the show is not a crazy popular show, sometimes you can get really good tickets just on the day of. Like, some shows just don't sell well, to be honest. And if you go to the theater, like, that morning, you could still get an S seat for some shows.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like shows in the Mura are a lot easier than Tokyo shows in that respect.
They are.
But, yeah.
But it's logical. Mura is so small. And in Tokyo, you just have the way bigger area from which to draw people.
And the theater is smaller.
Yes.
So it's sort of the opposite of what you would think. The bigger theater draws from the smaller crowd and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more space to sprawl a theater in Mura, so.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess, so there's those two big theaters which are actually owned by the company, but they also regularly go to some other theaters. You hear about, in Tokyo, the Nippon Seinenkan, which is actually closed and undergoing restructuring right now, so there's no shows there now, but usually they do shows there that match the ones that they do in Bao Hall in Takarazuka City. What are some other ones that they do down in Osaka?
They use the Umeda Arts Theater in Osaka and Theater Drama City, which is in the same building but in the basement.
Okay.
They also do national tours, which then travel different cities in the country. So if you are studying in Japan and you don't happen to be in Tokyo or in Osaka, you might still get lucky. Mm-hmm. No, what? I was wrong. A Song for Kingdoms is not the next tour. Jose and Carmen is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Moon Trip. Mm-hmm. I actually saw a couple of national tours, which are kind of fun. They don't always go all over all of Japan. Like, they'll usually focus on a certain part of Japan when they're doing the tours, which, if you're in the wrong part of Japan, you might have to travel a little further to see a show. But okay, so we're talking a lot about if you're in Japan or if you're visiting Japan, but let's talk a little bit before we go into anything else. If you're a fan and you can't go to Japan, it's just not in your budget, what are some things people can do to actually watch Takarazuka?
Well, the probably easiest way is to buy DVDs, I guess. Because while we complain a lot about the price of Takarazuka DVDs, or Takarazuka being a very expensive hobby, we still have the amazing advantage that most of the shows are being filmed.
Yes.
And
I mean, that's
that we can
impossible to think of. Yeah.
If you're a fan of most other forms of theater, that's not something that you're getting at all.
Yes, so what you can do is you can, of course, buy the DVD you want to see and enjoy it at home and from a perspective you would not even get if you had an SS Seiki.
And I mean, the price is pretty comparable for a DVD and like an S-Seiki seat in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of the DVD as one ticket and an S-Seiki. So I would probably have to spend that kind of money either way if I wanted to see the show live. And on a DVD, I can watch it over and over again.
And I want to point out that they're actually doing Blu-rays now, too. So the DVDs have gotten cheaper. Yeah.
For me, they didn't get cheaper because I now buy the Blu-rays.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was the same thing when they switched, like, VHS used to be very, very expensive, and then the price of VHS dropped when they switched over to DVDs. So I was buying VHS for a long time, longer than I usually would have, just because they were a lot cheaper. So they might start, if the technology changes completely, the DVDs might start going on sale, and we'll be able to get them very cheap.
But didn't they now start cutting stuff from the DVDs? I think the angles are cut for some of them.
To be honest, I haven't bought a DVD since they switched to Blu-ray, so I don't know.
I think the angles are being removed. The rehearsal content is still on both the DVD and the Blu-ray, but I think the angles are limited to Blu-ray now.
I usually don't use the angles anyway, so it doesn't matter to me.
Maybe we should clarify this a bit. On a usual Takarazuka DVD on our Blu-ray, there used to be special angles, usually for the most important people in the troupe. So if you're a fan of a specific person, let's say of the top star, and you want to see them up from very, very close all the time during a specific song, you can watch the angle for this song. If your person is not
silly.
If your person is not a top star or a Nibante, you're pretty much out of luck.
Nibante is the second-ranked Otokuyaku in troupe.
Although, to be honest, sometimes I would use the angles to watch the babies in the background, because sometimes that's the only way you can see some of the younger members, is like if they're not on the official camera view screen. Sometimes you can catch them on the angles, but not very often, so.
And then another option, I guess, you could use to watch a show, in this case even with subtitles, which is a bonus because normal Takarazuka DVDs do not have subtitles, you could go over to the Takarazuka Insanity Project and get your show from them. Jen, do you maybe want to explain a bit about the Takarazuka Insanity Project?
Sure. Well, we're a little old school. Some of you probably weren't even born back when we were doing anime subtitles on VHS, but we're kind of following that pattern of, the idea is that we actually do subtitle Takarazuka shows based off of TV broadcasts, which are usually either from an NHK, which is a Japanese TV station, or from Takarazuka Sky Stage, and we only send them out at cost on DVD. So you're basically paying for the shipping cost and the cost of the DVDs and the materials. And the reason we're doing it like that and not uploading them is we're trying to keep it, number one, we don't want Takarazuka Revue coming after us for copyright problems. And number two, it kind of limits the amount of copies that are out there floating around, so that it's encouraging people, I think, more to go out and buy their own copies as well. But that's our thinking behind it.
I think we're going to expand a bit on this. We're trying to limit the copies that are around in a bit. But first I wanted to ask, is there anything else you two would suggest doing if I want to see a show when I'm overseas?
I'm in a second Takarazuka Insanity Project that was a big help in me getting into Takarazuka in the first place, both because of the subtitles and because of the accessibility. Even though I, as a big fan, think the price of DVDs is completely worth it, I also understand that it's a lot of money to drop on your first few DVDs before you really know what troupe you like, what stars you like. So it's a really great way to get your feet wet and kind of get an idea of who you want to spend all that money on before you do spend all of that money.
And that's kind of what we were hoping that it would be useful for. Yeah. If you're talking about other ways to get tickets while you're in Japan, once you make some friends in the fandom, people who are in fan clubs, either Japanese friends or foreign friends in fan clubs, you can always get tickets through kind of like will call, basically, either through their fan clubs, or for the actresses who don't have fan clubs, they still get tickets. So you can, if you like a really young a really young actress, you can always write to her and ask, and sometimes they'll have extra tickets that they're trying to get rid of. So that's one way to do it.
That's another thing that should probably be pointed out. There is support in this fandom usually. I think as a fandom, the Takarazuka fandom is pretty welcoming and pretty supportive, which brings me to the probably last option of seeing a full show if you are overseas. you can ask for a live stream. There are people who are willing to stream shows from their collection, officially bought shows, for people on the internet, so you can see the show first and decide if you want to spend that kind of money on it, without the show actually being uploaded. And I think
Now, if you're an old fogey like me, can you tell us what live streaming is?
live streaming means that you are watching the show that is being... The person who streams watches the show on their computer, and at the same time streams their computer screen, so to speak, on a certain website. People who are into gaming might know Twitch TV. It works like that. It's just that most people who stream Takarazuka shows are using live stream as their broadcasting platform. So you just see a stream, you don't need to download anything, and you can watch the show at the time you agreed on with the person who is going to stream for you. The people who offer to do it mostly offer to do it on Tumblr. So if you are interested in something that streamer has to offer, you can just shoot them a message. People who offer to do it publicly also stream for people they are not close friends with. So don't worry about asking one of them or just asking in a general tag. Nobody is going to bite your head off for that.
Yeah, if you're really just nice, the fandom is still pretty small. So we're all still pretty excited when somebody wants to learn about it. So asking is definitely a good way to get what you want. I was definitely helped tremendously when I first started getting into Takarazuka by other fans, including Lisa. Lisa showed me a lot of stuff.
And I think if you don't spend a lot of time on the computer and you'd rather have a DVD version, there's a lot of fans who collect TV broadcasts. So once you make friends, I think it's a little harder finding people who are willing to trade, but if you find people who have copies of interviews and game shows and things like that, they're definitely willing to trade. You just have to step a little bit more carefully. I think it's good to get to know somebody, and then once you get to know somebody, you could say, do you know anybody who might be willing to trade or has something I'd really like to see Makoto Tsubasa on Quiz Hexagon. Do you know anybody who has a copy? And you can see if somebody has something, because I know I have like 1 million discs that I've accumulated over the years, and if somebody really likes a certain star, I love to like hunt through and see if I can find stuff. So definitely another way you can find things.
But as we got a lot of new people in the fandom, and I think a lot of them have noticed that there are no or very few uploads of full shows going around on the internet. And I think if we talk about that a bit, we also come to the last point on our agenda now, which is fan culture.
Yes.
So if we know all this fancy stuff about ripping shows and streaming them, there are a lot of people who make awesome GIFs from shows or awesome graphics. Why don't we upload them? Because for sure somebody must have figured out by now how uploading actually works.
And I'm just going to jump in really quick and say I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Takarazuka is a big family to a certain degree, especially in the fandom. Like, the actresses that you respect and look up to, they all start out as really young girls. So fans sort of glomp onto somebody either as like a sister figure or a daughter figure, and you sort of help and watch them grow as they graduate from the music school and go through their careers. And when you see how hard they work, you really don't want to make them lose money or hurt their business in any way that they're working so hard on by pirating shows. I think that's the big thing behind it. And then, so from that, fan culture has kind of grown.
I think historically, the parent corporation of Takarazuka has also been, I think someone mentioned this a little bit earlier, crushing in terms of finding their content online and getting rid of it. Very occasionally, some full shows will find their way onto YouTube, and a couple weeks later, the whole channel is terminated. They're very vigilant, and they don't let it slide. And I think more than in some other fandoms, because the online fandom is still relatively small, it's a lot easier for them to seek stuff out and get rid of it. It hasn't really gotten completely out of control like, say, something such as anime pirating has gotten out of control.
And I think building on that, like, anime shows are usually broadcast once, but Takarazuka is theater, and when you're pirating it, you're killing their ticket sales. Like, and I think that's part of why the company crushes it so quickly, because it really, really impacts their revenue when things are pirated and put online.
I think a lot of it also is a personal decision of the would-be uploader, because usually if you buy one of those very expensive DVDs, it's because you buy it if it's a troupe you like, or if there is your special person in it. And you know that bad DVD sales also reflect badly on the troupe or on the person, especially if the person is high up in the ranking. And you do not want to create additional pressure on them. Because especially on the people in the high ranks, there is a huge lot of pressure. And getting the additional pressure that the show is not selling can really, really harm them.
Yeah.
Especially because once it's on the internet, it is not limited to the foreign fandom who has no chance of going to see it live. Once it's on the internet, it would also be available for the Japanese fandom. Mm-hmm. And while the small overseas fandom might not make an impact if they all pirate as much as it is, for example, the case in the anime industry, it would be a big problem once it hits the Japanese fandom in this magnitude.
And I think because of that, and seeing how the fan culture behaves, when the foreign fan culture sort of adapted it, we took it, and I don't want to say we went to an extreme, but I think we police ourselves a lot more in some ways than the Japanese fans police themselves. I've heard Japanese fans say that. And I think part of it is it started out as a very small fandom, and we kind of took it to heart that we didn't want to be a pirating fandom. And so when other people join the fandom, we all love teaching each other about it. But I think as we teach new fans about this really awesome, very cool, sparkly thing, we also kind of say, and this is what we believe about, we shouldn't be pirating. And I think that has kind of colored our foreign fan culture, and I like it. I think it's a really neat thing, but I think some fans coming into it from maybe an anime culture are like, oh my god, these women who are already fans are like so mean and cruel, and they try to tell us what to do. Why do they do that? And I hope people don't take it that way, because that's not how we're trying to do it. We're just trying to keep it on a very, we're trying to follow that modesty, fairness, and grace of Takarazuka.
It might be worth mentioning that there is actually a name for this modesty, fairness, grace behavior. It's called the Sumire Code.
Yes.
So if you ever hear that being mentioned, it means this special way of behavior that a lot of the actresses and also the fans have adapted, because Takarazuka fan culture is quite special, not only on the internet, but also when you're seeing a show in real life. So maybe we can talk about that a bit. What makes Takarazuka's fan culture so different from usual theater fan culture? Carly, do you maybe want to start on that?
Sure. Well, there is a very prevalent and intricate fan club system. And I'm going to have to defer to you guys for some details on that, because I'm in an OG fan club. I don't think I've said that word before. OG is the term used to refer to actresses who have retired from Takarazuka. But while that's been really cool for meeting people and we have fun, it's basically a glorified ticket ordering service. There's not really a lot in terms of fan activity and rules, which the active Seitos clubs certainly have a lot of. I think pretty much all of the upperclassmen will have a fan club of some kind. How many years have to pass before you're allowed to have an official fan club?
I think it also depends on your popularity, because I know I've seen some young Otokoyaku stars who are only like Ken 3, Ken 4 get official. But we got to be careful when we say official, because what a lot of people don't know is the only official fan club is Tomonokai, which is a fan club run by the Takarazuka Revue. All of the actress fan clubs are run by the fandom. And again, it's that like fan culture has imposed its own rules on itself. So when we call those, there's like official and unofficial for the actresses, but even when we call it official, it's not like officially recognized by the Revue, although the Revue works with the fan clubs around like how they do their activities.
So maybe it's worth explaining that if you join the official Tomonokai, you just join a fan club that is for the whole Revue and not for one specific performer. And if you want to get into the club of one specific performer or Sato, then you have to get into the official, unofficial club.
Yeah. Have we confused everyone yet?
I hope we do.
Carly, sorry, we kind of cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I would actually, I think you guys can probably talk a little bit more about the active Sato fan club experience than I can. I mean, I have some friends who are in fan clubs, and I've watched fan club activities from the other side of the street, but I certainly don't want to step on anybody's toes since I haven't really experienced it myself.
Maybe we should pick up on this watching from across the street. Because there is something special that you can watch from across the street, provided that you are not in an active fan club.
That's true. Okay, so fans of any form of theater are probably familiar with stage door, where you just kind of wait for the actress to come out after the show, and if they're nice, maybe they'll sign something or take a selfie with you. In Takarazuka fandom, that's, again, I don't want to use the word official because it's not really an official thing, but it's a big traditional practice to do both irimachi, which is waiting at the entrance as the actresses go in, and demachi, which is waiting at the entrance as the actresses come out. If you're in a fan club, there's a specific spot that you wait for your actress. There's a specific spot that you go to when she arrives and she's ready to walk into the theater. There's rules of courtesy for how you behave when an actress, either more senior or less senior to yours, comes in, either before or after your actress. And if you're not in a fan club, you can stand across the street and watch all of the actresses come in and out, and all of their fan clubs following them around.
And just to give some names to those, the Japanese call it the gallery. The people who are watching who aren't members of fan club are gallery. The people who are fan club members who are walking with their actresses, there's a couple of, it's different in Mura and Tokyo, but basically the official, unofficial fan clubs have what they call guard. So they actually line up in a certain spot when the actresses are coming in and going out that kind of blocks the gallery from getting at the actress. So you're actually like a bodyguard in a way. Not all of the fan clubs do that. Some meet out of reach and they talk to the actress where nobody can see them, and then the actress walks in by herself. And some like that more kind of unofficial, friendly feeling. Some fans really don't like the guard system. They think it's way overly complicated and officiated, so it's sort of up to how you feel about it.
You also do not have to participate in guard if you are in a fan club. You can do it, but you're not forced to do it. So if you don't feel like waiting for a slower actress for like 40 minutes, you can just skip that part and go see the show anyways.
But but if you choose to do that, sometimes the other fans will be like, why aren't you doing your part? You got to pull your weight. And you'll get a lot of emails from the staff in the fan club being like, look, you've got to be here at guard. So, yeah, it's a choice, but you got to live with the consequences too.
Wow, my club let me off the hook really easily.
Usually when you can do irimachi and demachi whenever your actress is in the theater, so even if it's for rehearsal, usually during the run of a show, everybody has some matching item that they wear to signify which club you're in. I've seen things like scarves and jackets and hair clips and just some little thing that you put on that matches your fellow fan club members.
This is, I'm saying official with quotation marks on it. This is called clubwear, and if you want to do irimachi or demachi while the show is on, you are expected to wear it. If you want to stand in line with the other fans. During rehearsal, you normally don't have to do it. You mostly won't have it by that time, I think.
just to explain a little bit more about the fan clubs, the person who's in charge is called a daihyo, which basically means, the organizer. And then most fan clubs have staff. Depending on how big the fan club is how many staff members they'll have. And depending on the size of the fan club, people are human, and a lot of fans have been friends for a really long time, and they'll support one actress, and then when she leaves, they'll move on together and support another actress as a group. So I've talked to people who felt kind of left out because you join a fan club, and a lot of the fans who know each other already, it's kind of hard to get in. Sometimes it's cliquey, sometimes it's just people being friends and not necessarily needing to make a new friend. But there's always new Japanese people and new foreign fans who you can talk to too. But the atmosphere in clubs can be very different depending on who's in it. Again, human nature. One piece of advice that someone gave me once that I think is really good advice, kind of hard to do if you live overseas, but if you live in Japan, go to their tea party, which we can talk about in a minute. But before you join a fan club, you can always go to a tea party, even if you're not a member. And at the tea party, you'll kind of get a real feel for how the actress interacts with the fans and how the fans interact with each other and with the actress. So I think before you put the time and the money commitment into joining a club, it's a really, really good idea to go to the tea party and sort of see how things are.
Yeah. If you're interested in joining a fan club, but you don't live in Japan, the policies really vary from club to club. I know that there are several who absolutely welcome foreign fans. They love it. They will ship all of your documents and stuff to you wherever you live. And there are others who are a little more hesitant to do that, might require you to use a shopping service or a friend's address and really don't want to send anything outside of Japan. And there are probably some who are not crazy about having foreigners in them altogether. So it really, there's no rhyme or reason. It just completely varies from club to club.
And it's not like they're saying no foreigners allowed. I mean, they're thinking of the logistics of it. It's hard. Like if your Japanese isn't great and their English isn't great, it's a lot of extra time and a commitment for them. Like it kind of screws up their automated systems if you're a big club. So
they all have different levels of financial support too, because they're really self-organized. And just depending on the people who are on staff and sometimes the actress herself, it's just logistically not feasible sometimes.
It's also worth pointing out that these people who are running the fan club more or less are not getting paid usually.
No. Yeah, that's true.
It's all volunteer work, and figuring out how to do the logistics for people who live overseas, if none of the staff, for example, speaks English, can be super, super hard.
Yeah. But if you know that your star will welcome you and maybe you have a little bit of Japanese, you can enter a fan club by writing to her, or if you know somebody in the fan club, you can sort of get an in through somebody who's already in it.
Yeah, writing to them is usually the best way to find out, because like even if you don't speak Japanese, if you write a fan letter in English, like if they really want foreign fans, you'll still get back no matter where you live around the world. You might get back like, please join our fan club. Here's our form, and then you'll know, okay, they definitely want foreign fans. So
yeah, it's the big two ways are usually writing to the actress, and then the actress tells her daihyo, hey, there's this weird foreigner who wants to join the club. Can we do that? And if they can, you get mail or email or whatever. Or you can just walk up to the fan club when they are standing in front of the theater, usually during a show run. They will be giving out tickets, and you can ask for where the club is standing and attempt to talk to the staff directly.
Yeah, let's talk about the best time to do that, because I think a lot of people hear that and they're like, they go up and try to talk to the staff during irimachi and damachi, and sometimes that's okay, but sometimes staff is a little, like, they don't have the forms and things on them then. The best time to do it is when they're giving out the tickets, which is usually 45 minutes to half an hour before a show begins. So if you find them, and they're usually holding the little boxes of tickets. So.
They also usually have a sign with the name of the star on it, if it's a smaller star. I mean, the top stars, of course, will have the best spots, so you know where to find them. But I also think talking to them during irimachi or demachi might not be good, because, again, if it's not the top star and you're waiting right in front of the door, you're waiting at a spot that it's technically considered to be private, and that only the members are supposed to know about, so walking in there and just saying, hi, can I play with you, might not be the best, especially if the actress is a bit shy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a foreigner, they are going to remember your face.
Definitely.
And the foreign face that they don't know might be a bit, where did this come from?
Yeah. And I think that's a good point to make too when we're talking fandom and foreign fans. Like, some Japanese fans you'll hear, like, they don't really follow the Sumire code very well, and they can kind of get away with it because they can fade into the crowd. But, like, as a foreign fan, you stand out.
Oh, yeah.
So they'll remember. They might not be able to tell one foreigner from another, but they'll be like, oh, foreigners don't follow the rules, so we don't want any foreigners in our fan club, you know? So you might not be ruining your own chances. You might also be ruining other people's chances. So we have to police ourselves 150% more than the Japanese do because they remember.
Yeah.
And maybe just to illustrate how fast it can go, I went to Demachi with my club the first time, and I had brought a little present for the staff, and I gave that to them. And then the next day I came to Irimachi, and it was a different staff member, and I had never seen that person before, and she just looks at me and knows my name and is like, oh, hi, nice to see you.
Yeah. It's even not outside of the club experience. The first time I went to Japan, I came back to random Japanese people messaging me on Twitter saying, hey, are you that girl from New York who is at all these shows? And I was just like, what?
Yeah. And they'll
they
ask
do notice
you if you know each other. They'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
do you know that foreign fan in so-and-so's club? Because they think we all know each other, which most of us do. But...
Yeah, it's not totally a lie, but...
Oh, I've got to tell this story. It's just really funny. So they've got this very elaborate system, right? But the Tokyo Theater is near Yurakucho, which is also an area with a lot of places, shops where like office workers go after work. And Japanese office workers, especially the men, often get drunk when they're going out. It's just part of the culture. So you'll get these really drunk office workers like stumbling down the sidewalk at night while we're waiting for the actresses to come out in our neat little lines. And a lot of them know what's going on, but some of them have no idea what's going on. And so they'll like stumble up to you and they'll be like, what are you doing? And then I had one guy like actually stumble up to a Takarazuka actress and like make her shake his hand, and like the guard fans were just like horrified. They're like, oh my God, somebody get this drunk businessman away. He's ruining everything. It was really, really funny.
That is funny. Maybe we should talk a little bit about the advantages of joining a club versus not. That, for me personally, was one of the hardest things to sort of wrap my head around when I first joined the Takarazuka fandom. So when you join a fan club, you do get some perks. It helps. If you visit Japan often, it also helps. But I think you can definitely take more advantage of the perks if you're living in Japan or visiting Japan for an extended period of time versus if you're just a strictly overseas fan. But you get sort of, I don't know if I want to say priority because the seats are not always the best you can get, but there is special ticket ordering through your fan club. The actresses will get a certain number of tickets either to distribute to their fan club members, or if they don't have a fan club or they have a smaller fan club, to their friends and family also. And if you're in a larger fan club, you can order tickets that way. And typically, especially if it's going to be a very popular show, it's sort of a safer way to ensure that you're going to get a ticket. So that's definitely an advantage. The privilege of participating in Irimachi and Demachi is also an advantage. And during that time, you are allowed to hand your actress a postcard or a letter or a present directly. So that's definitely a nice perk. Unfortunately, if you're someone who really likes a lot of actresses equally, it's more difficult to support other actresses if you're in a fan club. And again, it's something that plenty of people do. But if you're a foreigner and you're active, chances are that they're going to notice if you're doing it. And it's something that's kind of frowned upon. If you're in a fan club, you're kind of expected to support that actress primarily until she retires. And that doesn't mean you can't necessarily write letters to other actresses who you like, but it's harder to very openly support multiple actresses, and maybe if two actresses have kind of a close personal relationship, you want to be careful of sending letters to both of them.
Right. If you're in a fan club.
Right.
Although I've got friends who do that, and sometimes they think it's hilarious because they are friends, and they're like, so and so said this about so and so, you didn't say that about me, you know. So one thing I just want to add to getting tickets to the fan club is there's something called kyoryokuhi, which is like a gift money, and they recommend if you buy a ticket that you give kyoryokuhi for each ticket you buy, which can be just like 500 yen, or it can be more than that. And when I first joined a fan club, I didn't realize it was recommended, but that really means it's necessary. Like, they use this money to like buy lunches for the actresses and like things like that, and especially if they're rising stars, like they have a lot of costs of things that they need to do. Like sometimes they have to like buy food for all the staff and stuff in the theater. Like, it's just part of spreading your largesse as you move up, and so it gets expensive. And they also use it to print, like they print out really cute envelopes for the tickets through the fan clubs. So they use that money for that sort of thing. So if you don't give the money with the tickets, like they remember that. So it's not, I mean, you can get tickets through fan clubs, but sometimes they're not the best seats, and sometimes they're more expensive because you're paying kyoryokuhi.
And typically the longer you're in a fan club and the more shows you go to and the more you support your actress, sort of the higher you rise in the ranks of the fan club, and the better chance you have of receiving a good seat to a show versus a farther away seat.
Yeah. I said we were going to talk about tea parties. We didn't really touch on that at all.
That's true.
Yes, we should start with the tea parties, because tea parties are fun.
This episode is going to be enormously long.
You can listen to it in installments. You can just stop after one topic.
There you go. So there's a tea party, which is ochakai, and there's also ochanomikai. And basically, depending on how senior the actress is and how official her unofficial fan club is, it can be like a huge group of people meeting in a big hall with like top stars usually don't even have tables. You're just sitting in rows of seats. And it's sort of the actress will talk about whatever show she's working on, if she's done any photo books or anything cool that's happened lately, if she's taken any trips. And sometimes they'll play games. Sometimes you can shake their hands. But if it's a younger star, you might be sitting at tables. You might get a little snack and a drink. And if it's a very, very young star or an older star whose fan club is small, you might end up like going out to a bar together with like 5 people and just chatting. So it can be a very, very cool experience. And again, you don't necessarily have to be part of a fan club to do it. If you go up and talk to staff and say, hey, I'd like to go to our ochakai, they'll usually give you the forms.
And they usually occur once per run of every Grand Theater and Tokyo Theater show. Occasionally they seem to have them for other theaters, but it's not every theater.
They usually do, and usually it's like only national tour shows that don't have them.
But yeah, they'll happen sometime during roughly the middle of the run of a show, and it's just kind of a cool way for fans to spend a more casual time with their favorite star. And sometimes it's fun to go see other different stars, ochakai also.
It also gives you a pretty good feeling for the club if you see how things are handled at ochakai.
Yes.
For example, you can tell how comfortable, at least at smaller ochakais, you can tell how comfortable the star is with interacting with their fans.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's just human nature. Some people have a harder time interacting with strangers, or it might make them a bit uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But, you know, they still try to do it because they try to be nice to everyone. And some other people are just really, really natural at talking to big crowds and being very entertaining all the time.
And you'll see how the staff is too. Like if they're loose, if they're kind of fun, if they are really creative, or if they're kind of more strict, regimented.
A certain Senka club, for example, is very strict.
I actually, a friend of mine really, really liked a certain member of Senka, and so we wrote to her when she was in Japan to see if maybe we could catch her ochakai if it hadn't passed by, and we actually got to go, and it was the most amazing experience. We got like 2 shots with her. It was like I got hugged by this certain member of Senka. It was like the coolest thing ever. I will never forget that experience. But
oh yes, 2 shots.
It's
2 shots is either the best thing about ochakai or it's the worst. Because usually during ochakai there will be small lotteries, and they will draw winners of the people who are attending to receive stuff. Like you can receive signed photos or a signed program, or I was at one where the actress picked it herself and it was some kind of merchandise, I think anime merchandise, and you got that signed. And usually the main prize is a 2-shot with that actress. That means you get to go up there past 200 people if it's a big ochakai, and stand there next to that actress in front of all those people, and you get your picture taken.
Right, and everybody's staring at you.
And if you don't like getting your picture taken, this will be the most horrible 2 minutes of your life.
And she's drop dead gorgeous, and you're making the worst face in your bright red.
Although, if I had 100 yen for every time an actress told me, "Oh, your face is so small," I would be a very rich woman.
Interesting. I've never been to an ochakai, and I'm going to my first one next month, and I'm very excited.
Oh, that's going to be so awesome.
It's going to be so fun. Especially when they tell goofs from the show.
Yeah.
And some of them have this tendency to act it out, and you can just see them talk with their hands and feet in front of all those people and getting really into it. And it's so beautiful.
It's so much fun because you get to see a side of a lot of actresses that you usually don't. So I would say, like, a lot of people, you hear about Top Stars the most, so a lot of new fans think they really want to go to the Top Star ochakai. That can be a cool experience, but the really fun ochakai tend to be the ones that are smaller. So that either means somebody who's not Star Tracked or somebody who's young enough that their fan club is small. Those can be some really amazing experiences.
I was just thinking, I don't think I've ever been to a Top Star ochakai.
I've been to a couple. Sometimes it starts even when they're nibante, like depending on who they are. It can still be cool because you hear some really cool stories, and it depends on the staff. But usually they stop shaking hands if there's a crazy amount of people. They'll stop taking pictures. Like, games get cut out. It's mostly talking. It depends on the star, but it's not as much fun.
I have to say, I was at Nibante ochakai where they had like 800 plus people, and she actually took the time for the handshake.
Yeah, I've been to a couple where they've done that.
And I was like, oh my god, your arm is going to fall off by the time you're
See,
through.
that's the thing. I always end up feeling really sorry for them. Like, oh my god, we're putting them through this horrible torture, and they're smiling, but it's like teeth grit together, and the staff is like, hurry, run, don't stop, don't say anything, and you're like stressed out, and it's not as fun of an experience.
We actually even got to say something, and I was like, this is going to take forever, you're never going to finish this. She finished, but oh my god.
Yeah, it depends on the actress, I think, too. Like,
it was a really fun ochakai, but that really, I think, impressed me the most because it was just this huge hall full of people, and I would never have imagined that it was even possible to give everyone a handshake.
Yeah, they're pretty determined to give you your perks for going because they want you to come back, you know. So, but another cool thing, like, the actresses who go on who aren't top stars and they continue acting, like, I followed a couple of women who did that, and so after they retired, like, there wasn't really a fan club anymore. They just sort of like mailed out an email to people every once in a while, and they'd be like, hey, yo, I'm doing this show, we're gonna meet at the bar afterwards, come on out. And that was like one of the best times I've had. It was fun.
Oh man.
So.
Certainly not everybody does that.
No, definitely not.
Imagine people like Hanafu Samari doing that. Oh wow, Yoka, you would have half of Tokyo there.
Oh yeah, that wouldn't work.
Hello, we need a bar for 1,000 people spontaneously.
We're just gonna show up. I hope you can fit us all in.
Maybe we should also talk about Reijo if we're already talking about perks.
Yeah. So Reijo is sort of like it's like a thank you postcard that you get for attending a show or participating in fan club activities. Again, depending on your star and the size of the club, you might get varying levels of personalization on your Reijo, but they're still nice to receive anyway.
Yeah. And sometimes if their fan club is small enough, or, you know, if they're informal enough, even if you're not a member of the fan club, if you write a fan letter, you might get one back.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I think there's so much. We could just keep talking forever. I feel like we should wrap this up, and then I'm sure people have a lot of questions. If you have questions or there's something you'd like to hear us talk more about, please drop us a note in our blog, and we're probably going to do a Q&A episode at some point, but we can also expand on any of these topics. Or if we said something and you're like, I have no idea what you were talking about, could you clarify? We can definitely do that too. So
yeah, we especially wanted to do sort of a deeper history episode. So if there is anything in that category that you're interested in learning about, let us know. And sort of a more detailed episode about fan club life as well.
Yeah, we like really just skim the top of that.
Or if you need tips for writing your fan letter, or if you're like, okay, I just got accepted into this club and nobody told me any rules. What am I going to do now?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, the rules are very unspoken. It's kind of like Fight Club. Like, the first rule of Fight Club is nobody talks about Fight Club. So and then you ask other fans for advice. That's
then you find yourself in Mura and you ask your club a question and they all look at you and have to think themselves and are like, yeah, it might be better to do this.
But that's what I love about this fan culture, is everybody helps everybody out.
Yeah.
Yes. I have to say, even being a foreigner, having this joint interest, also in the club, in this same person, it really gives you something to bind about. Like, when I got there the first time, I was super nervous, and then they were all so nice and trying to get me engaged into everything, and I was just so relaxed after a certain time. I went from nervous wreck to being really comfortable in a very, very short time.
Yeah. One other piece of advice I got from one of my senpai in the fandom, they're just as nervous as you are, and sometimes they're not sure if you speak Japanese, so they don't want to make you feel uncomfortable by talking first. One of my friends said, always bring like a little bag of hard candies with you, or something that's individually wrapped, because in Japan you don't just like pull out a stick of gum and give it to somebody. But and then you can share it while you're waiting in line or while you're sitting next to somebody in the theater, and that's a really great conversation starter. Then they know that you're approachable and you want to try and talk to them, and it breaks a lot of ice.
Just bribe your way in if you get into a fan club.
Maybe, there you go.
Maybe bring something like candy from your homeland, and just give it to your staff or something, because they probably have extra work with you if you're a foreigner.
Yes.
And you might not want to cause extra work, but you're still doing it. And a small token of appreciation and of, hey, I'm trying to be nice and fit in with you, goes a really long way.
It does, yeah. And they appreciate it.
They do.
Cool.
That was a really long episode again.
Yeah, absolutely. Please tell us if this episode is too long. Tell us what a good listening time is. All right, I'm going to sign us out. Any final thoughts?
Made me realize how much more there is to talk about.
It's the tip of the iceberg.
Hopefully it was a good starter. Yeah.
I think it was.
All right. I am going to sign us off. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope it helped instead of made you even more confused. And we will see you next time. Bye.